Welcome back, everybody. This week we're diving into your news. A whole stack of articles and blog posts you sent over.
Yeah, yes.
And they're all very recent, looks like between March 14th
Yeah, just the last couple of days.
and the 16th. So very, very fresh. And
Hot off the press.
there's definitely a theme I'm seeing here. Lots of climate change talk.
Yeah, front and center.
Some interesting environmental news.
Yeah, always.
And as always, a little bit of political drama sprinkled in.
Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment. We've even got penguins and
Penguins.
Teslas on the agenda today.
Wow, what a combo.
But let's get to the heart of it, I guess, climate change. And what's the latest news telling us?
Yeah, you've got a few sources here pointing to a potentially rapid acceleration of climate change, which is concerning, to say the least.
Oh, wow.
The Arctic News blog, for example, suggests a strong El Niño could be developing this year.
Okay, so for anyone who needs a quick refresher, El Niño, that's a natural climate pattern that warms the Pacific Ocean, which then can boost global temperatures.
It has a ripple effect.
And they're saying this could add more than half a degree Celsius to what we're already seeing with the overall warming trend. That's
significant.
That's huge, isn't it?
It is. And the blog also points out that this El Niño might coincide with high sunspot activity.
Oh, wow.
Which could further increase temperatures by maybe another quarter of a degree.
Really?
And then on top of all of that, we have to consider that February 2025 was the Earth's third warmest February on record.
Yeah, I saw that.
According to Yale Climate Connections.
Yale Climate Connections, yeah.
So you know the trend is...
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's quite clear.
It's like all these things are sort of lining up at the same time.
All coming together.
But I have to admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what a few degrees of warming actually means, like for us here on the ground.
Right?
Like what kind of impacts are we actually talking about?
Well, even small changes in the average global temperature can lead to some pretty big shifts in weather patterns.
We're talking increased likelihood of extreme weather events. You know, stronger hurricanes, longer and more intense heat waves, heavier rainfall that can lead to flooding.
Flooding, yeah.
And then, of course, there's the issue of rising sea levels.
Seas are rising.
Which threaten coastal communities and ecosystems.
And I imagine it disrupts ecosystems on a large scale, too.
Right? Absolutely. We're already seeing impacts on coral reefs.
Yeah.
Widespread bleaching events.
Yeah, that's happening now.
And many species are really struggling to adapt to these rapid changes in their environments.
So it's like a domino effect.
Yeah, it's a cascade.
Yeah.
The consequences are really far-reaching and interconnected.
So the science seems pretty clear on this, but let's shift gears a little bit and talk about how all of this is playing out in the political arena.
Okay.
Your stack here includes quite a few sources that highlight the Trump administration's policies on climate change.
Yes.
What's the overall picture there?
Well, there's definitely a lot of activity and some controversy surrounding the Trump administration's stance on climate change.
Have noticed.
For example, Skeptical Science has a news roundup that points to several policies that appear to sort of downplay the urgency of the issue.
Yeah, I saw that. I noticed those too. Like there's that article in The Guardian about Trump's energy secretary actively promoting fossil fuels.
Right.
And then that potential EPA rollback of a key climate regulation reported by Vox.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the U.S. potentially exiting a fund that was intended to help poorer countries deal with the impacts of climate change.
Yeah.
Also reported by The Guardian.
I saw that.
You know, these actions are certainly raising eyebrows in the international community.
For sure. And then there's that article, or actually I think there are a couple articles in both the Washington Post and the New York Times about the Mauna Loa Observatory potentially facing closure because of budget cuts.
Budget cuts, yeah.
Can you remind me, why is that observatory so important?
The Mauna Loa Observatory is where they've been measuring atmospheric carbon dioxide levels for decades, creating that famous graph called the Keeling curve.
Yeah.
One of the most iconic pieces of evidence we have that shows this clear and steady rise of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is directly linked to human activity.
So closing that observatory would essentially be cutting off a crucial source of data.
Yeah, a key piece of the puzzle.
That helps us track the progression of climate change.
It's a big deal.
Quite a statement, isn't it?
It is. It raises questions about the administration's commitment to actually addressing this issue.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I know there are different perspectives on all of this. Some people argue that these policies are necessary for economic growth or energy independence.
Right.
And then there's that whole debate about waste heat from industrial activity versus greenhouse gases. I have to admit that part I find a little bit confusing.
Yeah, it can be a nuanced topic. Skeptical Science actually has a really good fact brief on this. Which explains that while reducing waste heat can definitely improve efficiency, CO2 is still considered the primary driver of climate change.
Okay.
So addressing the problem means tackling those greenhouse gas emissions directly.
So it's not an either or?
No, it's not either or.
Both are important.
Both are important, but
Focusing on CO2 seems crucial.
CO2 is key.
Yeah, now there's another interesting aspect to this whole political landscape, and that's the influence of groups like the Heartland Institute.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that article in Desmog about them really caught my eye. Can you
Yeah.
tell me more about this group and what their role is in the whole climate change debate?
The Heartland Institute is a think tank that's been very active in promoting climate change denial
Wow.
and pushing policies that favor the fossil fuel industry.
Okay.
They've been quite influential in shaping the views of certain policymakers, including folks within the Trump administration.
Really?
So understanding their role helps to explain some of the decisions being made.
So we've got this, accelerating climate change, complex political agendas, even some powerful lobbying groups influencing the conversation. It's a lot to take in.
It is. It's a lot.
Where do we go from here?
Well, before we get too overwhelmed, let's remember that there's a whole other side to this story. The environmental news that goes beyond the political battles, and we've even got penguins to discuss.
We do have penguins.
But maybe we should take a pause here.
And give everyone a chance to digest all of this.
Yeah.
A little breather.
Sounds good to me. We'll be back in a flash to dive into those other stories, so don't go anywhere.
Yeah, right back after this.
All right, so we've covered some pretty heavy stuff with climate change and all the politics around it.
Yeah.
But now I want to explore some of the other environmental news you sent over.
Sounds good.
And I have to admit, some of these stories are just fascinating. We even have one about penguins getting their own retirement home.
Yeah, that New York Times article.
Yeah.
It's heartwarming to see that level of care for aging animals. They built this custom-designed island habitat at the New England Aquarium, specifically for the older penguins who need a little extra help.
Oh, that's so sweet. So what kind of special accommodations do these penguins need? Is it like tiny ramps and heated pools?
Cool.
I'm picturing like a penguin version of a luxury retirement community.
Not quite that elaborate,
Okay.
but they've definitely thought of everything.
Hmm.
The island has gentler slopes, so it's easier for them to get in and out of the water.
Okay.
Softer nesting materials,
Mm.
and even extra monitoring from the aquarium staff. As penguins age, they can have trouble with mobility,
Yeah.
and they're more susceptible to health issues. So this island is designed to give them the best possible quality of life in their golden years.
That's a good reminder that human impact on animals isn't always negative. That sometimes we can use our resources to help them thrive,
Right.
even in their old age.
Absolutely. And speaking of human impact, there's another story that I found really compelling, the one from Inside Climate News about a biologist's work to protect pink river dolphins in Colombia.
Yes. I was hoping we'd get to that one. It's incredible to see someone so dedicated to saving an endangered species. Can you tell me more about the challenges these dolphins are facing?
Yeah, pink river dolphins, they're also known as bocos.
Okay.
They're found in the Amazon and Orinoco river basins of South America, and they're facing a whole bunch of threats,
Oh, no.
including habitat loss due to deforestation,
Of course.
pollution from mining and agriculture, and then accidental entanglement in fishing nets. This particular biologist is focusing on research and conservation efforts to try to protect these amazing creatures.
So it sounds like an uphill battle.
It is.
What specific strategies are being used to protect them?
Well, the biologist is taking a multifaceted approach.
Okay.
First, he's conducting research to better understand the dolphins' behavior, their habitat use, and the specific threats they face in different regions.
Okay.
And he's also working closely with local communities, fishermen, and government agencies
Wow, that's a lot.
to raise awareness about the importance of conservation and to develop sustainable fishing practices that reduce the risk of harming the dolphins.
That's really cool. It's a great example of how conservation often requires collaboration
Absolutely.
across different sectors. It's
Yeah.
not just about science. It's about engaging people and finding practical solutions that work for both humans and wildlife.
Exactly. And sometimes those solutions require a bit of a shift in perspective. Like, for example, instead of just telling fishermen not to fish in certain areas,
Right.
the biologist is working with them to test modified fishing gear.
Oh, interesting.
That reduces the risk of dolphin entanglement.
That's so much better than just like shutting them out completely.
Much more collaborative approach.
So we've seen these really heartwarming stories about penguins and this inspiring work to protect these endangered dolphins.
Right.
But not all the news is positive.
Unfortunately not.
That LA Times article about the bird flu mutation found in 2 cats was a bit unsettling.
Yeah, that one did raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so the article highlighted a specific mutation of the bird flu virus that's linked to more severe illness in cats.
Wow.
And while it hasn't jumped to humans yet,
Yeah.
the potential for a new zoonotic disease emerging is always something to keep an eye on.
Yeah. And for those of us who don't know, can you explain what exactly is a zoonotic disease?
Sure. A zoonotic disease is simply a disease that can be transmitted from animals to humans.
Okay.
Think rabies, Ebola, even the flu.
Yeah.
They all originated in animals, but then sometimes they cross over to infect humans,
Right.
which obviously have really serious consequences.
So with this mutation in cats, is that suggesting that the bird flu might be evolving to become more transmissible to humans in the future?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we need to be really vigilant about monitoring these types of changes
Yeah.
in animal populations.
It really highlights how interconnected everything is: human health, animal health, and environmental health.
Absolutely. What happens in one sphere can definitely have ripple effects in others.
Speaking of interconnectedness, let's shift gears again and talk about some of the more local environmental news you've included here, especially those stories from the LA Times about California.
Right.
I know you're in California, so these will probably resonate with you. There's that one about the confusion surrounding the fate of these 2 new California monuments.
Yes. The Chuckwalla National Monument
Yeah,
near Joshua Tree National Park
right.
and the Satala Highlands National Monument in Northern California.
Yeah.
You know, these monuments were designated to protect these important ecological and cultural resources, but it seems like their future is a bit uncertain now.
What's causing all this uncertainty? Is it political pushback?
It seems to be there are ongoing debates about land management, resource extraction, and the role of the federal government in protecting these areas.
Okay.
And the article mentions that some groups are challenging the monument designations,
Interesting.
arguing that they restrict economic activity and local control.
So it sounds like a classic battle between conservation and development interests. It's really interesting to see how these issues play out
Yeah.
at the state and local levels. And then there's that other California-focused story about the Glen Canyon Dam
Yeah.
on the Colorado River.
That's a big one, especially for water resources in the West.
For sure.
The article highlights concerns from California, Arizona, and Nevada
Okay.
about the dam's aging infrastructure
Oh, wow.
and its potential impact on water supplies.
So it's not just about protecting natural areas, it's also about managing this really critical infrastructure
Right.
that affects millions of people.
Ew.
What are the specific concerns with the Glen Canyon Dam?
Well, the dam was built in the 1960s,
Okay, a while ago.
and some of its components are starting to show their age.
Oh, no.
You know, the states are worried about the potential for leaks, structural failures,
Wow.
reduced water storage capacity, all of which could have serious consequences for the region's water supply, especially as climate change intensifies droughts in the Southwest.
Yeah, that's really scary. So it sounds like they're calling for the federal government to step in and address these concerns.
Exactly. They're urging the Trump administration to invest in repairs and upgrades
Okay.
to ensure the dam's long-term viability. It's a reminder that even in a technologically advanced country like the U.S.,
Right.
we still rely on this aging infrastructure that requires attention and investment.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got these monument debates, concerns about these aging dams, and of course the ongoing saga of climate change. It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, you do.
But I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the interconnectedness of all of these issues. I'm starting to see how these seemingly separate stories actually share some common threads.
I'm glad you're picking up on that.
Yeah.
For example, those wildfires raging across Texas and Oklahoma
Yeah, I saw that.
that were covered by the New York Times,
Yeah.
those aren't just isolated events. They're directly linked to this larger issue of climate change.
Right. The article explained how climate change is intensifying droughts, creating all this drier vegetation,
Yeah.
leading to more extreme heat, all of which make wildfires more likely to start and spread.
Yeah, it creates a perfect storm.
It's a stark reminder that the impacts of climate change are happening right now and they're affecting people's lives.
They are. And it's not just these large-scale dramatic events. Even our everyday actions can have an impact on the environment. That article for the conversation about email signatures really brought that point home for me.
Oh, yeah. The one about how those little signatures with all the images and logos at the bottom of our emails
Yeah?
are contributing to the carbon footprint of the internet.
Yeah.
I'll admit, I never really thought about that before.
It's one of those things that seems so insignificant on an individual level.
Yeah, you don't think about it.
But when you consider the billions of emails sent every day,
Yeah.
it really adds up. All those images and attachments require energy to store and transmit, which contributes to greenhouse gas emissions.
So it's a good reminder that even small changes in our behavior
Yeah,
can collectively make a difference.
absolutely. And speaking of collective action, we also have that article from the New York Times about Greenpeace
Yeah.
facing a bit of a reckoning.
Yeah, what's going on with them?
Well, Greenpeace has a long history of activism,
Well, of course. Yeah.
from their campaigns against whaling and nuclear testing to their more recent work on climate change.
Yeah.
But the article suggests they're facing some internal challenges and struggling to adapt to a changing world.
What kind of challenges are they up against?
Well, there are some internal conflicts over strategy and priorities,
Okay.
as well as external pressures from this increasingly polarized political climate.
Makes sense.
Some critics argue that their tactics have become too confrontational,
Okay.
while others feel they haven't gone far enough. They're also facing financial challenges, as some donors are shifting their focus to other causes.
It's interesting to see how even these organizations that are dedicated to environmental protection have to kind of evolve and adapt to stay relevant and effective.
Yeah, it's a sign of the time. And maybe their struggles reflect the larger challenges we all face in addressing these complex issues,
Yeah.
like climate change. How do we balance these different perspectives, find common ground, and create lasting change?
Which brings us to that final and maybe most unexpected story, the one about this unlikely alliance between Trump and Elon Musk
Yes.
to promote Tesla to conservatives.
That's a hit-scratcher.
It really highlights just how complex this climate change debate is and this potential for finding solutions in really unexpected places.
You never know.
Right. It seems so counterintuitive that a president who's been skeptical of climate change
Right.
would team up with an electric car company that's often seen as a symbol of environmentalism.
Right, but as the New York Times article points out, this alliance might be more about economic nationalism
Right.
and appealing to a specific consumer base,
Right.
but about a genuine commitment to reducing emissions. Still, the potential impact on the electric vehicle market is huge.
So even if the motivations aren't purely environmental, it could still have a positive effect.
Yeah.
In terms of reducing our reliance on fossil fuels,
Absolutely.
it's a reminder that progress can sometimes come from surprising sources, and we need to be open to unconventional solutions.
Right.
But before we dive into that further, maybe it's time for another quick pause.
Yeah, let's let all of this settle in for a moment.
Okay, we'll be right back to explore these final pieces of the puzzle. We're back, and I'm still thinking about that Tesla story we were talking about.
Yeah?
With Trump and Elon Musk. It just seems like such a strange pairing, you know?
Not sure.
But it really underscores this deep political divide that we keep coming back to.
Yeah.
How can we even begin to address climate change effectively when something like electric vehicles becomes a partisan issue?
Yeah, it's a huge challenge. The New York Times article really hit on that point, how this polarization in the U.S.,
Yeah.
often prevents us from making progress on critical issues.
Right.
Like climate change, it becomes less about finding solutions and more about scoring points for your team.
Yeah, it's like we're stuck in this loop of us versus them, and the environment gets lost in the shuffle.
What's often missing is that sense of shared values and a willingness to actually listen to different perspectives.
Yeah.
It's easy to retreat into our own echo chambers
Oh, yeah.
and demonize the other side. But we forget that we all share the same planet
Right.
and ultimately the same fate.
So how do we break out of that cycle, especially when it comes to something as complex and potentially divisive as climate change? I mean, it can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a big question.
Yeah.
I think one key is to try to shift the narrative instead of framing it as this battle between two opposing sides.
Yeah.
We need to emphasize the shared risks and the shared benefits of actually taking action.
What do you mean by that?
Well, instead of focusing on the things that divide us,
Okay.
let's highlight the things that unite us.
Yeah.
For example, we all want a healthy planet for ourselves
Right.
and for future generations.
Yeah.
We all want clean air and water.
Yeah.
We all want a stable climate and a thriving economy.
I mean, those are things that everyone can agree on.
Exactly, regardless of their political affiliation.
So start there with the common ground.
Yeah, start with that common ground, and then we can talk about solutions that benefit everyone.
Okay.
Investing in renewable energy, for example, can create jobs, boost the economy, and reduce our reliance on fossil fuels.
So it's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
What about that argument that taking action on climate change will hurt the economy? That seems to be a major sticking point.
It is For a lot of people, it's important to address those concerns head on and to provide evidence to the contrary.
Okay.
There are countless studies showing that investing in clean energy and sustainable practices can actually stimulate economic growth and create new opportunities.
Really?
We need to make that economic case for climate action
Yeah.
really clear and compelling.
So it's about framing the issue in a way that resonates with people's values and their self-interest, rather than just presenting it as like a moral imperative.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to make climate change personal and relatable. Instead of abstract data points and scientific jargon,
Right.
talk about the local impacts that people are already experiencing in their own communities.
Go.
The increased wildfires, the more intense hurricanes, the rising sea levels that are threatening coastal towns. Those are things that really hit home for people.
Yeah, you can see it. You can feel it.
Exactly. And what about those who still just deny the science of climate change altogether?
Yeah. How do you reach those people?
It can be tough, but I think even in those cases, there's often common ground to be found.
Okay.
Maybe they're concerned about government overreach or the economic impacts, so focus on solutions that address those concerns.
Okay.
Maybe it's promoting energy independence through renewable energy or highlighting the potential for job creation in the clean energy sector.
So meet people where they are
Exactly.
and find ways to connect climate action to their values and their priorities.
And don't underestimate the power of individual stories. Share the experiences of people whose lives are being directly affected by climate change.
Yeah.
Those who are on the front lines of this crisis.
Yeah.
Humanizing the issue can be incredibly powerful.
Because at the end of the day, it's about connecting with people on a human level and reminding them that this isn't just a political issue.
Right.
It's a human issue. It affects all of us.
It does.
But where does that leave us? What can we as individuals do to actually make a difference sometimes? It
Right.
feels like our actions are just a drop in the bucket.
It's easy to feel that way, but it's important to remember that change happens on multiple levels. Individual, community, national, and global. Your choices matter. Your voice matters. And your engagement in the political process matters.
So what are some concrete things that people can do?
Well, start by reducing your own carbon footprint. Make choices that support sustainability in your daily life. Educate yourself about the issues. And talk to your friends and family about climate change support, businesses, and organizations that are taking action. And most importantly, get involved in the political process. Vote for candidates who prioritize climate action and hold your elected officials accountable.
So it's a combination of personal action and collective action.
Yeah, we need both.
We need both to create meaningful change. Well, this has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into climate change, environmental news, and all the complexities of the political landscape. And a huge thank you to you, dear listener, for sharing your sources with us and trusting us to guide you through this information overload.
We leave you with this final thought. If we don't bridge this political divide and find a way to work together on climate change, what will the world look like in 10, 20, or 50 years? What legacy are we leaving for future generations? It's a question worth pondering, discussing, and most importantly, acting upon.